Hey, you guys, we are excited to share with you some very exciting news. We have created an online training platform that you can do in the palm of your hand.
With over 20 modules and nearly 80 lessons, this is the most comprehensive and detailed scalp micropigmentation course out there.
For those of you who can't travel here, maybe you're in other countries, you can now learn from your computer, you can sit at home, you can sit in a bus, and you can learn scalp micropigmentation with the greatest innovators in this industry.
Want to learn more? Click the link below.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Scalp Solutions Podcast. I am your host, David Santiago, and today my guest is my man, Mr. Stevie G. What is good, my brother?
What's up? What's up? What's up? I'm so happy we're finally connecting, man. It's been
It's been a journey.
The worst, I know.
It's all good. Listen, you're very busy. That being said, I appreciate you taking out some time, to jump onto the podcast again. Yes, we have been trying to facilitate this, make this happen. I feel like this is a very important, topic, topics that we're gonna discuss, because there's not a lot of artists that have this information, and the ones that think they have the information are putting out some crazy stuff, and subsequently, is affecting the work of a lot of artists. So I appreciate you for being on here, brother.
Of course.
So before we get started, man, just real quick, let everybody know where you're from and the name of the studio.
A bit about me. My name's Stevey G. Call me Steve, Steven, whatever. I am from South Florida. Grew up in Broward County, Fort Lauderdale. I currently work at my studio, Sculpted, here in Miami. I've also got another location in Manhattan, Chelsea. And I started doing SMP around 2012. We touched on, we got into it. And yeah, it's been a huge journey since. And I've had locations kind of in a few different places. In 2018, I took a little sidestep. I woke up one day and my hand was just shot. Couldn't use it anymore. The only thing I could do was tattoo. And I had to get some shots in it and everything. It was really bad. But I realized, it's because the equipment that we were using. No one had really had anything for SMP. We were using whatever we got off the shelves, whatever anybody else was using. So 2018, I took a little sidestep. I got rid of the clinics and I went over to Microview, which is the permanent makeup version of FK Irons, which is basically the Apple of the tattoo world. And I spent little under 2 years being mentored by the owner. And that's where I really dove deep into creating machines, finding everything out, like behind the machines, making needles, getting into pigments, and really like tailoring the product side. Because really until 2018, none of the big boys had really like stepped in the ring with us. There was no, if anybody was doing products, they were grabbing it off the shelves in China, white labeling stuff. Nothing had really been like engineered for us,
Right.
So that was super important. So I did the Apollo, which was the first dedicated SMP machine, like really engineered for scalp micropigmentation. That was awesome. And since then, I've not left after that mentorship with Gaston. I'm now back just in the clinic teaching,
Passing the information forward.
Yeah, I'm always digging deep, man. I always wanted to know how and why. Super important questions. Because when we started shit almost a decade ago, like it was just do it because it works, and that doesn't work for me. And we kind of all hit a wall at some point. I hit it first at 100 miles an hour. I hit this wall and I was like, shit, where do we go from here? And luckily I was introduced to Toni Belfatto, who had been doing this in Italy since like 92 or 93. I think 93 was the patent filed for tricopigmentation. And met him, brought him over to the United States in 2015. And he didn't speak any English, only Italian. And he had really pieced together like the science of it. And that just made everything click. I was like, oh, no wonder when I do that little thing with my hand, that doesn't work. Or no wonder this isn't happening. No wonder am I moving my machine speed. Like it all clicked together. And we were kind of in this weird transition in the industry where like, you know, the original ways of SMP were really like the tricopigmentation style. It was supposed to be really semi-permanent because the thought process was the only way you can control the color and the dots never expanding or never changing colors, whatever it was, to make it semi-permanent. And you know, they were doing treatments every 2 months, every 3 months. It was just, as a business, it was kind of crazy. And you know, the what we know as modern SMP that kind of came from like London and came over to the US was very much like permanent, big results happening quickly, and like a few sessions and it's out. And we've had some really interesting evolutions over the years, you know, and we're starting to, it's getting really interesting out there. You know, I'm seeing a lot of shit happening that, you know, 5-10 years ago, there was no way we could have executed it. We said, nope, can't do that. Can't do strokes, can't do shapes, can't do texture like this. And yeah, with 0.40 millimeter long taper 1-round liners and a fucking Bishop V6, you're a little limited, you know, and pigment that was so heavily diluted that you can only get certain effects. Now we're pigment's getting even better and better and better. The needles are shaped perfectly. We've got machines that are tuned for this, you know, and what is being done is incredible, but you're not following the rules. There's, you know, I boil scalp micropigmentation down to its true purpose, for me at least, in my practice, is hair follicle replication, right? SMP in its truest form is, how do we replicate this follicle perfectly over and over again, right? And that was what it was for a really long time. And I think now, because a lot of barbers are stepping into the ring, which is great, because shit, years ago they laugh at it. Why don't you just use Beijing and some fiber? Like that too would be crazy. You know, now they're all, see how much money we make, and they're like, fuck this, $40 haircuts. But you know, they are really pushing towards this. That's my chemist. But what they're doing is they're more replicating these haircuts. And I'm not just talking about like the straight lines and everything, because that's fine, you know, but I'm seeing,
You mean like the density in regards to like saturation?
I'm seeing first session work that is just like, that shouldn't happen until several sessions. And I'm seeing people practice in a way that doesn't make sense, right? Like the reason why, for example, the reason why sessions were a thing was so that you could literally layer your dots. You could literally layer your dots on top of each other. This way, we're replicating a follicle, right? So we've got the follicle underneath the skin. We've got this hair. You shave the hair. You've got this little dot of 5 o'clock shadow. And then we've got this follicle sitting underneath, right? And this follicle shows us that 5 o'clock shadow dot because of the way it processes light, right? Same page. Light passes through, bounces through the follicle, comes back. We see 5 o'clock shadow, right? So the only way to truly replicate that is to put our pigment and layer it in a way that it's literally like a column of pigment in the skin. This way it has the same relationship with light that an actual follicle does, right? And the reason why originally why these sessions were done in spacing, you know, every 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever it is so that while the body is healing itself, you know, we go through these full cellular regenerations in 21 to 28 days. So if you break down your process every 2 weeks, whatever, you can work with the skin's natural healing process and literally layer your dots, right? And now I'm seeing people who in their sessions, they're just, I get students or I get other people who are asking me questions and they're like, you know, their work's looking super flat. There's no texture to it. There's no real definition. And in each session, they're not layering. They're just adding more density. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you just adding density? And I'm like, well, that's the way I was taught because it was done in sessions. I'm like, well, if it was just adding density, why don't we just spend all day putting all our dots in a perfect place and call it a day? The science has been forgotten.
Yeah. And I think there's a, there's a common misconception with that. So like you see how you say layering, and I guess, for the people that are watching this on YouTube, so they have visual, like you say, the layering you're talking about is impression on top of impression, where like most artists, and I feel like especially those that are now training, when they refer to layering, they're talking about the first session and the second session. So the second session is the second layer of
So
your SMP. So they're just
this is
filling in.
So there's a big problem with how we interpret the science of art, right? And we keep tying it back to fine art, right? We don't work in fine art. We don't work on white paper, right? So our color scales are already off because we don't work on white. And then this isn't Photoshop, bro. It's not layers, right? It's not just a layer here and a layer there. And what's happening is you'll see this a lot. They'll go and they'll lay foundation one, right? Maybe with full density or whatever. They lay that down. They use a really soft diluted gray, right? They lay that session down. Then they go in the dots here, okay? Let it heal a little bit. Second session, they come back and they dump a whole nother foundation on top of it, right? Maybe some get layered. Maybe some are just off the layer. Maybe some are completely off, right? And then they do that again. So what happens is, especially when you're using heavily diluted black, which we'll get there in a second. Now, remember, the skin is in a 3D space, right? Which is translucent. Even though there's color to it, it's translucent. You can see through it. So what happens is, at that initial, after that last session or whatever, it looks really great. You got this underlying kind of gray that plays against these really dense black dots. But what happens is you have a dot here, you have a dot here, and you have a dot over here. So when you look down on it through the skin, you've now basically killed all of the skin tone because your dots are all over the place. And it's impossible to get proper texture like that. And will it look great for a photo? Yeah. 3 months in? Yeah. 6 months in? Probably a year? Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't stay like that, right? And you've been to the scalp shows. You've seen people pointing out left and right. They have these heads that are just completely shaded out. There is absolutely no texture.
Skin.
And there's no skin. The hair is follicle, skin, follicle, skin, follicle, skin. I don't care how dense your fucking head is. There's skin in between the follicles. And that has been lost. And I know that there's some people who actually teach going in with a really, really diluted gray and basically going so heavy that you kill all the skin tone. And then they build their darker dots on top of it.
Top of that, yeah.
And yeah, it looks great for a photo, but it'll never stay. So outside of layering, which is like, layering is I think the only other person who, there's a lot of people who grasp it, but somebody who does this exceptionally fucking well is Toni Belfatto and Chris. They understand this because we come from the same like tricopigmentation background, and he calls it like dot recall, right?
Because I learned it from him. I went out there to learn.
He does dot recall, and his hand is so good, mine as well, where you can actually execute that in one session. He'll lay his dots, he'll see that some need to be retouched, and he'll go and retouch them, right? I don't suggest that for people who don't have incredible hands, because what happens with the skin is your skin is like a sponge, right? And it's a dry sponge. And the second you ablate it with a needle, right, it's traumatized. So it becomes swollen, even on like a micro scale. So now that dry sponge is now a wet sponge, right? It's going to soak everything up. So you just need to understand that if you're going to go and do that dot recall in the same session,
have that nice touch.
You better touch it slowly. But this should be done, not should be, but this is in a, like what I teach my students is we're going to do this session 2. Session 1, we're gonna add our density. We're gonna pull back a little bit just to make sure everything's nice and everything. Then session 2, we're adding density and layering session 1. Literally dot on top of dot, right? And that's how you get those really nice, long-lasting results. And when you pair these non-layering techniques with the traditional diluted black method, and this is where you end up with these heads that just have literally no texture. Some dots are maybe a little darker than others, but it is flat, bro. There is no like, you should be able to look like you can pluck that thing out of the head. And I spoke at the SMP Expo in Phoenix. It fucking broke my heart. I was talking to an artist I really respect, and I had this kind of conversation. Talking about someone else's head, how it's super flat and this and that. And he was like, well, what does it matter? That's how it always heals down anyway. I was like, no, it fucking doesn't. It doesn't. And if you layer properly, you can get there. You can create that texture. The other problem is with the way we've been utilizing pigment, right? And the idea is we take this concentrated black and we dilute it all the way down per skin tone, right? And that's just one color, and that's just saturation, right? Color has saturation, hue, and tone, right? Like Instagram, right? You play with your filter. So in order for that straight black to look decent on a lighter skin tone, right? You got to dilute it. And what is it, like 20 to 1, 25 to 1, 30 to 1? It's insane. I have literally sent every major pigment in the world, I've sent to the lab. All of them. I know what everybody's doing. I had to.
So you sent it to the lab, if you don't mind me just interjecting real quick. You sent it to the lab for the purposes of what? Just to test the potency, make sure.
Yeah, it's everything. I wanted to, I mean, look, you can look at the back of the bottle and you can see what the CI numbers are and these, but I wanted to know ratios. I wanted to break this down literally into a formula, like a literal algebraic formula.
Got it. So the actual formulation. So like, if you don't mind, can you elaborate, like when you say breaking down the formula?
Pigment is made with pigment powder, which is your colorant, right? Whether it's carbon or whether it's black, carbon black, or whether it's brown, whatever it is, you have a pigment powder, right? And that pigment powder can be refined really, 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 really well down into like almost like a baby powder, or it can be more like a grain of sand, right? Traditional tattoo pigment is usually a bigger particle size, just because it wasn't until people got into permanent makeup that we really started like ripping this shit apart. And the higher quality permanent makeup pigments and some of the SMP pigments, it's really hard to tell unless you know where it's coming from. You know, it all comes from like one place. You know, there's only a few people that manufacture pigment. But so you have your colorant, and then you have what's called your surfactant or your excipients, right? And that is where things start to get proprietary, right? So there's like only a handful of blacks, a handful of carbon blacks, a handful of iron oxide blacks. This is what it is. Where things start to get proprietary is when you start messing with excipients, right? Your base, right? Your water, your glycerin, your resin, your witch hazel, which is in most people's thing. And everybody has a different sort of ratio of their excipient. And I, for one, don't think anybody knows how or why they're executing that, because all of these things have different levels of opacity, right? So you want something to, it doesn't really translate so well into scalp because our dots are so small. For example, when dealing with lips, by messing with the excipients, by changing the glycerin load or the alcohol load or whatever, I can pull more to a glossier finish than a matte finish. And this is because we're messing with how light plays, right? Exactly. How much transparency is in that pigment, right? So almost all of the black dilutions out there, even some of the newer browns that people are putting out, are as high as 80% water, right? Now, our bodies, we are hydrophilic. We love water. We're made out of water. So the easiest way to deliver something foreign into the body is with water, right? So now we've got all this water, right, in this coloring. And now to put it in somebody with really light skin tone, we've got to dilute that another, I don't work with this stuff, but you know, sometimes it's 20, 25, 30 parts to 1 of more excipient. And there's another problem there because most people just dilute with water, right?
Yeah.
You have an excipient base that's got water, glycerin, and whatever, and that has a very specific ratio.
And
Now
you're saying
you're only, right, and you need to keep this rate to keep that pigment intact. You need to add equal parts of excipient. Well, now you're only adding diluted water, which completely throws off the entire ratio.
Powers everything else.
Unless you've really thought ahead and you created your surfactants in a way that you know you're going to dilute with water. Okay, most people haven't gone that far, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So now what happens is where we're looking to work on these really lower skin tones, right? We are going to dilute them so heavy. This way we get a really nice soft gray, right? And it won't go blue or anything because it's so soft. No. So the first thing that happens is you go in with this super heavily diluted pigment, right? And you get a nice crisp result in the beginning, but it comes back soft no matter what. First thing your body does is it pulls all that water.
Pulls it out.
Pulls all the water, leaves you with a much softer dot. So people think that it's the body processing out the pigment. No, all that's left is the pigment, right? It's spotty, right? It's not a full dot because it's got to be diluted so heavy because it's not accounting for the lightness of the skin tone. So now they're doing that, and because of the water, it doesn't get smaller. It's fucking impossible. It's going to expand just a little bit. Even on a micro, nano, pico scale, it is going to expand a tiny, tiny bit. Now, because of that and how much it's been diluted, now it's allowing so much more light to pass through, right? So in the opposite of what they're trying to do, which is dilute it to work for the skin tones, they've now diluted it so much that the undertones can shine through it, right? And black or gray or whatever is just saturation, right? From a 0 to 100 in black, right? It's pure saturation. There's no hue, there's no tones, pure saturation, right? When you take black and you add it, or gray, or any dilution of that black, and you add it to green, blue, red, yellow, orange, what does it do to that color? It darkens it.
You mean when you make, I was going to say like,
Simple. It darkens it, right? It's just like turning the contrast up on the TV. It darkens that color, right? So now we've got this
really up there because I'm like, are people doing this on the scalp? I'm like, who's mixing?
So now, bro, they are. So now what happens is that gets that super diluted is just putting like a little bit of a darker filter on the undertones, and that's how you end up with blue tattoos.
Okay.
This isn't bad pigment. This isn't molecular change happening inside of the skin. This is pure color theory and its relationship to light. That's it. So now you've got soft gray, a little bit of darker gray, a little bit of like another one. They haven't been layered, right? So now they're all opening up on each other. And now you've seen it. You've seen it heal into kind of, it's not migrated, but it's these kind of blobs of darkness against light with no skin tone, right? Because you can't account for the undertones. You got to dilute so heavy. So this is why I've moved into using, let's just call them colors, right? Modified blacks that work against the natural skin tone and color, right? Because the skin tone, as we've been taught with the Fitzpatrick scale, is flawed. The Fitzpatrick scale has nothing to do with skin color. It is pure saturation from light tan to dark tan. The purpose of the Fitzpatrick scale was to quantify the relationship of how UV light affects skin. That's why if you've ever really read a Fitzpatrick scale, it says, light color burns heavy, doesn't burn, burns, you know what I mean? That's
got it.
That's the real purpose. It is not a color classification in any way.
So its origin is to give you the gradients in between the sun.
Yeah, exactly. It's how does this skin react to the exposure of UV light, right?
Interesting.
That's it. Does it burn? Does it get darker? What happens in UV? And somehow it turned into a classification of skin color. But if you look at the Fitzpatrick scale, there are so many more fucking skin colors that are there just with that saturation. And then you throw undertones underneath it, and it's a whole other conversation, right? Again, we're not working on flat paper. This isn't fine art, right? We're working in a 3D space, which is constantly growing and changing, and light is coming through from all different angles, right? So we need to understand that. So we've created this black gradient scale, and sure, it works great on a lot of people. That's fine. It works really good, but it doesn't work on a lot of people. And let's be honest, I'd say, you know, I've been doing this 8, 9, maybe 10 years. I've seen maybe half of my clients come back, if that. So yeah, you're sitting here saying, oh yeah, my shit never goes blue, never happened, never happened. You don't fucking know, because there's fucking bunch of people walking around with blue heads and nobody's telling them, and they're looking in the mirror happy they have a hairline. And the worst thing you can do is judge your success as an artist on your client's happiness. What do they know?
Can you say that one more time?
You cannot measure your success as an artist by how happy your clients are.
Wow. And you know what? I'm not even gonna, I'm gonna be transparent, man. I found myself recently doing that.
Yeah. Oh, it's fine. He loves it. Okay, cool. As a business owner, okay. As an artist whose goal is perfection.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally see your perspective.
What do they know about what we do? Nothing. They're happy they have a hairline. That's it. So seeing, oh, well, you know, my client's happy, it isn't enough for me. You want to run a business, do that, fine. I'm way more than that. I'm very much an advocate to, because the problem is I had this problem the other day. My homie calls me and he's like, yo, I just met this guy on a boat, and man, his SMP is, oh, you got to fix it for him. And I said, I don't do repairs, not happening. But the crazy thing is, I was talking to his girlfriend and his other girl, and the whole time they're looking at this guy's head like, what is wrong with this guy's head? Meanwhile, my client's sitting right next to him and nobody has any idea he's got anything done. My point to that is not to brag, but it's to show that nobody sees the good work.
It should, okay, got you. Right,
nobody sees the good work. That's the purpose.
Right.
They see
it should be undetectable.
They see the bad heads. And now they saw this on Instagram and they were interested, or they read an article, whatever. Okay. But then they see that guy and they're like, ugh. So my goal is a lot more macro than me running a successful business. In order for our industry to really survive, there needs to be quality control. Because what's going to happen is the floodgates haven't even opened yet. They're on its way. This next year or two is going to be insane. We're going to see a rush like microblading, right? Microblading just boom, went crazy. That's going to happen to us, right? And it's up to us as a collective whether that's going to last, because who gets microbladed anymore? And if they do, it's for $100,
right?
Because the quality went to shit.
Yeah.
Right? And it scares me a little bit. It scares me a little bit. So, you know, I'm not, you know me, man, I'm not tight with my science or my education. Like, take it and run with it, and please do better. I don't care how, and I'm gonna be a little cocky for a second. I don't care how good of an artist you are. You spend an hour with me, I will put you on another level. There is just shit that I've dug so deep into, and there's little things to pick apart here and there. You can always be better. And now that we're having all these new tools and everything and all this stuff, we're able to create art in a way that was never done before. You've got Toni dropping hair strokes over there, which have been totally dismissed. You know, guys like Toni Belfatto.
Years ago. Yeah.
Can't be done. Well, yeah, it can. And as long as you follow the rules, as long as you're going in at the right angles, using the right colors, this and that, everything. And we need to pull back to what's real. You know, there's only one science, man. Your body only works a certain way. Color is color, light is light, your body is your body. There's facts, hard facts.
You can't defy it.
Not change. But you can mess with those a little bit to redefine your art.
Got you. Got you. Now that you talking about, you know, messing with certain things and redefining your art, right? I mean, obviously you're like an SMP almanac, right? And at the moment, there's in the industry, you know, one of the big topics is brown pigments, greens, neutralizers. Can you elaborate, you know, on them both and how they're supposed to be used? Because I feel like, you know, you're the only one who's really been preaching about, you know, browns and like neutralizers, but you've come with the actual facts behind it, where like you ask other artists, some of them are just like, and listen, I'm not trying to discredit, you know,
No, it's just
artists.
It's not there. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, well, this is what I was taught. And it's like, you know, in
So
theory,
it worked, but
yeah, you know, and like in theory, a lot of things sound good, but you know, I like to know like the actual science behind it. Is it going to be effective?
So the original thought process for what we know as traditional color theory for the gradient black, right, is our target color, right? The answer to our equation is some level of black, right? Some saturation level of black, right? That's the answer, right? Our goal is to mix our pigment in a way that we put it in the skin that we get black. So originally it was, okay, we're taking the skin tone, and you can literally assign a value to skin tone, like the Fitzpatrick scale, right? 0 to 6, right? You can literally assign a value to that. And you can also find how you dilute your black. You've seen everybody's gray scales, right? And they say, oh, the colors, those are called Pantone colors, right? Which you can also
Pantone, P-A-N-T-O-N.
T-O-N-E. They are classifications of color, right? You can assign a value to that as well, right? A numerical value, right? So the idea is we've got Fitzpatrick scale, which is, right, we'll call that F, right? And then we've got our pigment, P, and divided by the dilution equals target color, which is one of those Pantones, right? Simple equation. That's how they developed, whether they know they did that math or not, that's how they developed that grayscale.
Gotcha.
Well, color is more than just saturation. Color is saturation, hue, and tint. You've played with Instagram filters, right? This is what a true color is made of. It just so happens that black has no tint or hue, right? So in that equation that I just said, that we've got that saturation, they've completely left out tint and hue, which is fine for that equation. And what they've done is put that equation to that gradient is built on a white scale, right? A value of white, which we value at 0,
Right.
Right. We never work on white.
I was gonna say, realistically, we don't touch that.
We never work on white. Never happens. We never work on white. So that equation already right there, we don't work on white, and we've left out tint and hue. But even though we left out tint and hue, if we just change that base value of that equation going to 0 or white, if we now assign a value to that based on the Fitzpatrick scale, that whole color scale is off.
Gone.
Not only is it off, it's varied by every color of the Fitzpatrick scale, right? Now that Fitzpatrick scale only has a saturation definition. There is no tint, there is no hue. It's just saturation of light to dark, right? So Proper color theory, as we've redefined it, is a formula that defines every variable. Our target color, which is always gray or black, is always our target. It's always where we're going. But now we have defined numerically skin color as well as undertones, right? So somebody, you know, I work with people all over the world. My clients that are from Colombia and have a FITS 2, FITS 3 have a very different undertone than my FITS 2, 3s from Eastern Europe. They're more blue, purple. These guys are more orange, red. You've got guys like me that are yellow. You've got all these different undertones, right? And those need to be worked into the equation, right? We still have this target of gray, but now we have all of these other variables that are skewing the equation. And we're not working on a white balance value of 0. So we've got all of these new definitions that set a totally different formula, right? So that formula we've literally created, and I've assigned values to CI charts, and based off of 5 years of research on incomes and outputs and stuff, we've tested these inputs and outputs against these color theory equations, this algorithm, and it's sound, right? And the answer isn't a direct color, the answer is a range, right?
Got you.
It's from this part of the spectrum to that part of the spectrum, right? So I've redefined color theory down, and forget about the Fitzpatrick scale. It's more of like a wheel that incorporates all of the different colors of the skin with all of the possible undertones and what those can turn into, right? So, and that's a whole other conversation. But this stuff can literally be proven algebraically, right? Based on putting values into functions, right? So where people have, so now the thought process with using brown, right? What is brown? Brown is a collection of colors, right? And that brown can be created with black, red, and yellow, black, red, yellow, green, and all different ratios of that. You throw white in there, and you've got all different shades of brown, right? And years ago, when pigment was, when it was old and permanent makeup pigment didn't have so much money behind it and everything, these colorants were not refined very well. So, and when they were using it on eyebrows and stuff, they got really highly saturated, and when it wasn't executed properly, mixed with poorly milled iron oxide and titanium oxide, you would see these uneven heels sometimes. That's my pushback. Oh, well, there's other colors in there, so these colors break down different ways. Yeah, sure, but not really, and not anymore. And so what people have taken from what people think is color theory is, let's just add orange,
yeah,
so that we don't get blue. Makes sense, because we have these things called chromatic opposites, right? And you look at a color wheel, and the colors that are across from one another cancel each other out, right? You add them together, they have now become neutralized. A neutralized color is gray or black, a saturation of the lack of color, right? So where they've gone wrong, which it works, adding orange to black works, but only for certain skins.
Right. I was gonna.
What they've thought is, because they've taken pieces of people's speeches and things and tried to piece it together, is they've been, oh, well, I don't want blue, so let me add orange. Now remember the math equation, right? Blue is the output of the formula. We don't neutralize the answer. We neutralize in the formula to get our answer. So yes, there are many cases where you can add orange to a black and get a perfectly healed gray. There's many that don't.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Just like a straight black dilution works on a lot of people, but it's not perfect, and it can be better, right? So there's, yeah, that's
So how do we do that though? Because all right, so the blue is the answer. You have to get something that's part of the equation.
So now we look at the equation, right? And we change the input for skin color and undertone, right? We've got skin color, which gives us some level of saturation, and we've got our undertone, which is our hue or our tint, right? And those have values. So in order to, our answer is going to be black, right? And once our answer is black, we can add dilution to our black to fix for the, right? We can always play with the saturation by diluting it. But for this equation, the answer is black, right? So how do we arrange these variables in a way to make it equal black, right? Black is, again, everything neutralized. So remember chromatic opposites, right? Colors that oppose each other cancel each other out. So we not only need to identify the color of the skin, the Fitzpatrick scale, the saturation of it, but really the undertones, right? Because we're working in this 3D space, and those are the colors that shine through. Because black is only saturation, it doesn't account for any hues or tints, so it can't cancel any of those out. So I'm identifying undertones and I'm killing them in the formula.
Okay.
If I see red, I'm adding green. If I see blue, I'm adding my oranges. If I see yellow, call me crazy, I'm adding more of a
red,
purplish blue.
Okay.
I worked on an Indian guy the other day with fucking damn near purple pigment. Purple and yellow.
And that's what balance. And, you know, I wanted to ask that too, because I see, you know, there's browns, there's greens, there's oranges, and
I've never seen anybody with the greens. The only reason it would look green,
I feel like I've seen pigment, like push
actual straight green pigment. I've got it in the back. You know, you can use that to neutral. People will throw it in their eyeliner. So people have been using green in their eyeliner for super fair tone people forever. It's because it kills the red, and you get left with this really thing. If you've seen somebody's SMP pigment that happens to look green, they didn't.
Oh, I mean, like the actual green. Like I've seen, like there's
straight up forest green.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
So, okay.
That would be used in somebody who's really, really light skin white with red showing through. You know, your gingers with freckles and shit. That green plays against the red, cancels each other out. We get left with a perfect neutralized gray.
Got it.
So this is literally defined algebraically. This is color theory. It doesn't fucking change. And yes, there are just like anything, there's exceptions for the rules. There's times where you can tell me, hey man, I used straight black on somebody who was this color and it healed great. Fine. But that's not the rule. And you got lucky. Now, what's important about using proper color theory is that now we're not fucking around with heavy dilution. We can kill the water, and now we can use a color that plays perfectly against the skin tones where we don't have to dilute.
And it'll hold.
So now we can get this really beautiful definition, this really beautiful texture, and tiny little dots that are fully saturated from the papillary dermis all the way through the epidermis that lock in, because you can have a high pigment load and get beautiful results. Now on top of that, now we start playing with the chemical components, right? We're just used to carbon. Carbon is excellent. And the only reason we use carbon is because that's the way most of the blacks that people use are created, right? There's also iron oxide blacks. There's all kinds of shit, right? There's several of them. Yeah. Tons of them here. I literally tried every carbon black, every iron oxide black, every combination and ratio of carbon with iron oxide, because when we have this total color of what we're trying to create, we only want these elements, right? We want the carbon because your body knows what it is, doesn't try to get rid of it. It lasts a really long time, stays its color, stays its shape. However, you go a little too deep, that carbon's gonna crawl like a motherfucker. I always say carbon's got legs. Can I curse? I hope so. I haven't cursed in a while.
No, it's fine. It's just
Carbon's got legs, it'll crawl, right? So you get a little too deep and it starts to pull. We see migration and that stuff happening all the time. Also, carbon and that black has a medium to low light transparency, right? Which means light can pass through it a little easier. So it pulls typically to the cooler side, right? I mean, we can see this with tattoos everywhere. They go cool, it just happens. It's because of the transparency of light, which we discussed. Now, with playing with these other components, like iron oxide, for example. Iron oxide you can think of as a rusting nail, right? What happens when a nail rusts? When it gets rusty, right? What color is rust?
brown.
Orangey, red.
Oh, orange, sorry.
Rust color, right? So now iron oxide is also more bioavailable to the body, right? Your body doesn't know what it is. It sees it, says, what are you? Get out. It starts to break it down, right? And this is a long, slow, long process. Really long and slow and drawn, I mean, decades. But what's happening is as that iron oxide is slowly breaking down, it is releasing what I call molecular warmth, right? On a molecular scale, we're getting that oxidation of iron, which is rust. So now we've got that molecular warmth playing against the carbon, right? So on the fucking back end of this shit, on the chemical component, we've got a way to help things going cool in the oxidation process of the skin, right? Then we've also got titanium dioxide, which is a really big molecule, right? Titanium dioxide is used as sunblock. It's actually the main ingredient in sunblock. So titanium dioxide is this really, really big molecule. And once that big molecule is in there, what it does to the pigment formula is it creates it's more opaque. So now less light can pass through, so it stays more true to its target.
Got you.
Now we've got carbon, iron oxide, titanium that all play together against these colors that have been done properly. So now we've got a beautiful heel today. We've got a way to protect it on the back end. And that's not even including what we can now do for women. Target hair colors, target follicles, play with these different tones. I mean,
you know, and not to cut you off, like I could see why it's so much easier for artists to just say, well, this is what I was taught, because like color theory is incredibly like complex.
wait till you get into like,
You know, so like you go from being told, hey, you got $3,000, you come into this industry, you can make a crap load of money. All you got to do is just place dots on the head, make it look like they got a hairline, and you're going to be great. And then you hit that wall, right? When you get these clients coming back, and now you want answers. I would assume like any good business person would want answers to, or like how to like spew it out. And then you come across someone like you, right? You have these answers and you're like, holy shit. Like you just really realize how technical SMP truly is. And it's not just dots on the head and creating, you know, a hairline. And it's crazy because when I started writing out the questions, Stevie G, I had over 2 pages of questions, and I was like, I know there's no way we're gonna be able to cover this, you know, like in the time that we have. And I feel like this could easily be like a whole day podcast, because color theory is just like so complex. Do you offer this as a sole training, color theory? Is this something like
so I've got so for the last year, I've been working with Permablend. So I've been with them, with the chemists in the lab, breaking everything down and creating all of this. Once I release that, which I'm shooting for the SMP Expo at the end of May, I'll release, there'll be a free educational component with the pigment set to learn how to properly use it. One set is going to be for men, which is going to be that gray target, and one is going to be for women, which is more of a brown target, you know, each consisting of a different pigment, whatever. So there'll be a free component that comes with that to teach you how to use it. then there will be a paid color theory class that's
Outstanding.
because once you really understand color theory, then you can start playing with multi-tones and playing with dimension and playing with, you know, using some dots that are a little bit bigger with one tone against smaller ones on another tone to give the look of volume.
Got it.
There's so much that can be done, but we're so, I mean, to think that we're using one color for every single person is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
You know, I always agree.
But it makes sense though too. It's like, okay, we only want gray. Follicles are always gray, so we use some dilution of gray. Like I sold that forever. It made sense, but
not anymore.
So yeah, there'll be a lot of education based on that. A lot of people have rushed to put out browns and this and that. Fortunately, that's not the answer. There's going to be a lot of pullback once I drop a lot of this information, and it's not to. It's never for the reason to prove anybody wrong. I don't care about that. I don't have an ego for that. You know, it sometimes is a byproduct, but
it just sounds like it's for preservation of the industry.
It has to. We have to do it. And I'll be and I'll be the asshole. I get it all the time.
Somebody's got to do it, right? So Stevie, before we wrap it up, my brother, I want you to let the people know where they can find you, right? All your social media platforms.
Yeah.
And then I have one last thing of you.
All right.
One piece of advice in respects to color theory to every SMP artist that's listening.
One thing to respect it.
One piece of, I'm sure right now your brain is going through it. All right, so what's one common problem that you see right now in respects to color theory that every single SMP artist is doing, and your advice is, don't do that, do this?
Oh, learn. One of the toughest parts for me was trying to learn how to really identify skin tone and undertone. So we need to really understand, like, how do we classify color in general? But color theory, I hate calling it color theory because it's the only reason it's theory is because the answer to it is a range. Other than that, it's law. This is the physical universe and how light reacts and how we perceive color. This isn't some shit I came up with, you know, and we've always used what has been there before us to define what we're doing moving forward. We've looked other places. It's now time to, we've got enough of us that are smart enough with enough case studies and enough results that we can now look at things and say, wait a second, this isn't right.
This ain't right.
This isn't right. And can you get it right by accident? Sure. But the goal of all of this is to cut the margin for error, right? Get a little bit better. And yes, maybe this is more for some of the you know, how often do you get a super light-skinned red guy with freckles? It's not every week. It may not be every month, but it exists.
Right.
And we don't have a treatment plan for it. So this is a way that you can use science to broaden the way you deliver your art. And if you can do that, it's endless what we can create, man. And it's amazing. I'm seeing these people do what took us 5, 6, 7 years. They're doing it in years. They're able to take all of this information and fucking run with it. And it's amazing. They're pushing the limits, and they're doing it's amazing.
Yeah. A lot of new artists emerging and coming out with some amazing.
But if we want our industry to live forever, which I think it can, because I don't see anything pushing us out, we really need to pay attention to the science, and we really need to figure out a way to all of us do some kind of quality control and make sure that, you know, you want to keep making millions a year, you better make sure that these new people come in and don't fuck it up for us. Yeah,
I agree, man. I agree. And Stevie, man, I really appreciate you, man, taking out some time, dropping some ultra bombs, ultra gems. But before we go, man, I want everybody to know, let them know where they
Oh,
can
yeah.
find you. I'm pretty sure everybody already
Yeah,
knows.
you can find me on my personal Instagram at Stevey G _ SMP. My studios are Sculpted Studios. Find that on Instagram. And yeah, it's really just Instagram, man. Stevie G, Sculpted Studios. Yeah, I'm out there, man. You'll see me at the shows. Be at the
Scalp show coming up in Las Vegas. You're one of the headliners there, of course. I'll see you there, my brother. And again, I appreciate you.
Are you gonna be there? You're not gonna be in Tulum, or you doing both?
No, I won't be able to make Tulum. They changed the dates, and I won't be able. Those dates don't.
But
They
you
don't
come to
work.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
man. We'll link up, my brother.
Oh, super excited.
Yeah. Likewise, my brother. Again, I appreciate you, man. And
I can talk to you forever.
that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of the Scalp Solutions podcast. To the next time, guys.
All right. See you later, brother.
Excellent.